Hello, everyone. Thank you for coming in. I'm Pooja. I'm from ThoughtWorks. I specialize in legacy modernization and cloud architecture. Today, I'm going to share a little bit of my experience having gone through a number of legacy modernization journey with a lot of clients. And every transformation initiative, excuse me, my voice is a little sore today, but every transformation initiative is pretty unique, right? So you start with varied legacy estates. Sometimes the organizational maturity is different depending on the organization that you go to. And sometimes the push comes from the IT team. Sometimes it's the business who is bottlenecked with a lot of operational inefficiencies that exist with status quo. And because of all of this, there is a push towards digital transformation. And no matter the starting point, one of the things that I found common is that the appetite for the organization to move ahead with this modernization initiative is the ROI that it gives, right? So the sooner you're able to recognize the impact of these transformation initiatives, the better funding that you get. So that's the major lessons that I've learned. And today I'll be sharing a little bit about how do you keep that momentum sustained? How do you make sure that it's not like a one-time go live and you're done with it, but how do you keep moving forward? How do you make sure that the transformation goes to an end? I'll be sharing a few lessons on that today. So if you see, most of the modernization programs don't really fail because there are tech problems. It usually fails because the business loses interest, and long before the technology itself is ready, right? So if you look at this graph, there is an area called the transformation fatigue. So as engineers, our effort keeps increasing because you need to set up the foundational architecture, you need the infrastructure in place, you need the security frameworks to be in place. So our effort keeps increasing, but the visible value to the business is nearly flat. Like for a long period of initial stage, it is only tech value that comes out, not really the business value, and hence the business loses interest. And that's that gray area of transformation fatigue. And that's typically the place where your budgets get exhausted, your patience gets exhausted, and business really starts asking you for what's the visible value that you're providing. And most often than not, people fall into the feature parity trap, right? So what happened at a recent engagement for us is it was a huge insurance industry, and they had just gone through like a 10-year of transformation program, and it was big bang. So by the time the product went live after 10 years, it was already legacy, right? Like you started with technology 10 years ago, and people were really frustrated with the long time that it took to modernize. And they were already stuck in the feature parity trap. So they had existing systems. The new systems would only just about modernize it very little. But by the time the 10 years elapsed, the requirements changed, the scale changed, and nobody anticipated that, right? So that was the legacy estate that we went in very recently. And what happened, so just before going into that, right, so this is like the fragmented experience that they were living with. So they had two legacy systems, the recent insurance client that I worked with. The legacy A was the one that went through the 10-year journey. So it was already on like .NET 4.6, again dated. It was on-premise systems, and it had a dated SQL server as well. So this whole thing took about 10 years to build, but by the time it went live, I think it went live close to 2 years ago. So it was still new for the business, even though the build had started 10 years ago. On the other hand, what happened was the company went through a merger. So they inherited yet another legacy system doing the exact same thing. So it was essentially a policy administration system that they inherited. So there were two legacy estates doing almost the similar things, basically issuing policies. And because these systems lacked APIs and lacked good interfaces for integrations, all of the rest of the peripheral systems like the claim system, finance system, and the data platform, they all coupled directly with the databases. So there was direct database coupling. So any changes in the schema that was happening on either of the systems would have to be coordinated and orchestrated with every other team in the entire enterprise, right? So at the end of the day, it was blocking the speed with which features could be delivered. It was blocking any additional changes that were required by the business. And the CIO realized that it was time for modernization. But you can appreciate the sensitivity, right? Like the system had just gone live after like a 10-year transformation program, and then we're saying we have to modernize again. It didn't go down too well with the business stakeholders. So we had to change the narrative a little bit. So instead of looking at the entire system and saying we'll do a total replacement, what we started doing or talking about was strangling in incremental slices. So what we had to do was to move away from a big bang release to smaller, thin slice vertical releases. So what we did first was to look at the business pain points, right? So you could slice the monolith in multiple different ways. What we did was to go through, like a pain point visualization exercise. So we asked the business stakeholders and the users of the system what is their high pain point, right? And then after that, we said that we should identify that high-value business capability, which if we release immediately or quickly, will provide the most benefit for the users. So with that intention, what we did was to look through the entire estate of the insurance gamut. And what we found was the document generation capability. So once you've issued a policy, all of us know that there are a bunch of documents that need to get generated, right? So that particular capability was the highest pain point for the business users, and that felt like a good enough use case for us to start validating some of these ideas. So what was happening in the legacy systems was one of the systems did not even have bulk capabilities. So to generate a document for a single customer, the underwriters, people who issue policies, had to go through like a very slow Windows-based application and click on generate document 1,000 times. So if there were 1,000 customers, for every one, this exercise had to be repeated multiple times. So people were just working overtime only to produce documents. Whereas on the other side, there was like a bulk capability from a UI standpoint, but the backend was still sequential. So there would still requests go one at a time. And what that caused was like server crashes because it was on-premise. It couldn't scale. So that was still like a big pain point on both the systems. So given that we identified that as our first target, what we did was build like a very efficient document generation system in isolation first, right? So that was able to build at cloud scale. So we use cloud native services like Azure Service Bus, hosted them on container services, and made sure that whatever we are building was for scale. And keeping in mind that the two systems that have merged, that was the load or the SLAs that we had to support, right? So we were able to create a new world, so to say. But given that document generation comes towards the end of the entire process, right, you still need data around, let's say, policy issuance, who is the customer, right, like what are they insuring? All of that is something that is critical for documents to get generated. So all of that information still existed in the legacy monoliths. So how did we make sure that data was efficiently transferred between the two worlds? This is like a very critical thing if you need to start doing incremental modernization, because your old world and the new world needs to run in parallel. And that's the only way you can avoid big bang transition. So what helped us is to adopt like a Strangler Fig approach, and 3 pillars sort of helped us with that, right? The first one is called the anti-corruption layer, or think of it as a translation layer, which would isolate your legacy systems data and any legacy debt that would happen in the legacy world away from the cloud world. The second was single source of truth. So no matter which system the users are, right, whether it's the old world or the new world, you need to make sure that the data is consistent. It cannot happen that, I'm the new system, data is still outdated, I need to go back to the legacy, fetch the latest. So the sync was pretty important between the two systems. And the last thing that we did was managed migration. So because this was the first time the enterprise was experimenting with this new approach, we made sure that there is a safety net or a fallback mechanism, right? So if something went wrong in the new world, people could still fall back and go to the legacy systems. And for that, it is very important that the data is consistent across all of these different systems. So to double click a little bit on the ACL layer, right? So if you look at the legacy systems, you can see that the schema is like really flat. There is no clear domain separation. The same data is represented differently in the two systems. Now, if we had built the new platform on top of this data directly, what would have happened is the new platform should understand the language of the old systems. That means inheriting a lot of these legacy data. Like there were around 1,000 different fields which were not even being used. So we didn't want to bring all of that debt into the new system. So what we did was to build this ACL called Domain Data Facade in between. It's a new service, standalone service. And what it did was to translate the information coming from the legacy systems into like a new unified data model. Right? So it would have a cleaner separation, and it would understand what is a customer, what is a policy. Right? So the new document service that we developed, it just needs to ask, hey, give me a customer, right? It doesn't need to care about the old schema or the differences in schema between the two systems. So that was the role of the ACL. And because of this, we were able to build the new platform in isolation. So it didn't have to care about what technology stack the legacies were on, how would it interconnect with the existing systems. All of that responsibility sat with the ACL layer. So it would feel like the ACL layer is like a throwaway code, right? Like you're building something, you're investing in something that would later be throwaway once all of the legacy is decommissioned. But think of it like a scaffolding, right? So you wouldn't build like a completely new building without putting a scaffolding in between. It's virtually impossible to build something new. So this is like the scaffolding for the new platform. And what it helped us with is to pace our delivery in a much more less risk way. So only once people were convinced of the capabilities in the new systems where they migrated over, right? So that low-risk migration, legacy debt containment, like I was talking about earlier, and incremental value delivery, all of this was possible only because of this one layer in between. And the last thing that we did was, in order to support this sort of a decoupled architecture, right, you also need to make sure that your teams are aligned and they follow Conway's law. Right? That was the one conscious shift that we did in terms of organizing ourselves as teams. So the first was to move towards domain teams. So when I say that each domain, so the document service is one domain, for example, customer service is another, they own everything end-to-end, including the UI, the services, the integrations with the existing systems. So that's the only way we could achieve decoupled and independent deployments, right? Different release cycles that don't depend on each other. And the second thing was looking at it as a product over a project. So we wouldn't dismantle teams or move people around once a go live is achieved. We make sure that that entire capability is extracted out, and then they own the entire life cycle of the services, be it support, be it adding new features to it. We also had a platform enablement team that was like a centralized team which should provide templatized infra capabilities. So then the developers who may want to create new services tomorrow, they would just have to use the templates and create services. So it was more of a self-service kind of a thing. And the last thing was to have an outcome-driven metric. So we moved away from measuring, just once again. Yeah, go for it. Yeah.
How do you justify that to the business if they say, well, this person is underutilized?
Yeah. So we made sure that the team sizes wouldn't change too much, right? Like, so if an individual person might move teams, that's still fine. But we made sure that one team would own the entire capability by themselves. So then if a single person moves out, that was still okay. But as a team, that particular team was responsible for the repositories, the pipelines, all of that was owned by that team. So that the handoff did not happen between teams, is what I mean. So like the same repo is owned by that team. Right? So the last point was that we measured our success by outcomes. So things like, how soon are the documents generated? Like I was showing earlier, we moved away from like 4-second document generation to under a second for in the new world, right? So then we started moving towards that kind of a conversation with the business, and with that, they started seeing a lot more benefits in terms of incremental migration. And right now, we have around 3 or 4 teams looking at 4 different capabilities in parallel. So yeah, that's my time on the queue. And it was a very short. It's impossible to cover the entire thing in 15 minutes, but essentially, you need to just protect your new code, make sure the people are aligned, and have incremental value mindset towards legacy modernization, and that'll help you achieve where you want to go. Yep, thank you so much.